Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today I'm going to be doing a stream featuring Pretty Gets Gritty. So I wanted to do a bookmark stream because I thought that'd be a really good place for lots of beginners to start. So I'm going to break everything down step by step and hopefully be able to see your comments at the same time. So don't be afraid to say hi and let me know that you're watching, or if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and hopefully I'll be able to answer them live on stream. So we are currently live on the Pretty Gets Gritty group as well as on the Plannercraft page, YouTube and Twitch. So hello to all of you out there. Morning Thea and morning Lynette. So hopefully you're all having a fantastic morning, and morning Mum. So fingers crossed, let's get stuck in. So I'm sorry if it seems a little dark today. Don't quite know what's going on with the light, but it's pretty dismal here. So I've started by creating a plain bookmark. So this could be one that you've cut out with die, it could be that you've cut out with Scanner Cut, or you can just do what I've done and just use a trimmer. So I'll just use a little offcut to get started, and just off stream I've just rounded this top edge and added a little hole, so with a punch. Good morning Deb, good morning Linda. Now to the side I have, and I will try and keep things in the light because it's a little bit annoying with the camera. Let's see if we can just move that over there a little bit. We have some offcuts of some nice sprays. So some of these are on mixed media paper, others are just on normal copier paper. So you don't have to have anything fancy for this if you don't have it already in your stash. The sprays I used were Coastal Waters, Blush Dreams, and we have Dove, and to those I've added a couple of explosion powders. So this one here is Artemis, and then I've just sprinkled a few random ones to get some dots into our other pieces here. So I'm going to set those to one side for a moment, and I've also die cut a little clock that we're going to cut into to actually create some texture onto our piece reasonably quickly. You're also going to want some background stencils. So good morning Carol. And hopefully I'll be able to see some of everybody's comments. So I'm going to go, let's go this way up. And you want to, when you're positioning your stencil, make sure that you're going off the edges with all your shapes so it doesn't look like you get a random border. And I'm going to pick peacock feathers as our distress ink to start with. Just going to grab a blending brush, and I don't want this to be perfectly even colour all over. I want to have it kind of hit and miss. I'm not going to do all of the stencil, but you want it so that it looks like it fades off. Now because I'm going to do 2 or 3 different colours on this stencil, just make sure that you try and get all the excess off your actual stencil itself. So there's going to be some bits where you do bigger sections, others where you're only going to do the tiniest of sections. Hi Dawn. Now I'm just working onto my messy cutting mat, as I call it. But if you have a blending mat or a glass mat, that can actually work in your favour. So I'm going to switch ink colour now to Picked Raspberry, and I'm going to grab a blending brush that will work for that colour. Okay, line up my stencil again just because it's moved. start in this top corner. And don't be afraid to overlap your colours a little, so that you start to get a bit blending. I'm going to go down to this bottom corner. Okay. Now I have pulled out two other ink pack colours. I've pulled out Venom's Potion, which is a really strong deep purple, but I want to try and keep that to sort of like stamping an outline or things like that we can colour. So for our background I'm going to keep it reasonably light, and next I'm going to go to Spun Sugar. And there we go. We've got kind of a distressed background. And with what's left on my brush, I'm just going to very quickly do a little bit of ink blending around the edge. Now because it's Spun Sugar on here, it's going to be quite subtle. But then I can switch over to my Peacock Feathers brush and just use any excess that's still in that. Good way of cleaning your brushes. Okay, so now that we've got our first bit of our background in, just want to start deciding my layout a little. So I just want to use part of the clock, so I'm thinking we could offset its angle slightly. So this is useful for if you have done a die cut where you've worked with offcuts, you can just use fragments of it. In actual fact, I think I might go with that because we've already got this straight edge here. So very roughly I'm just going to chop that so it's ready to go. Now you could cut 2 or 3 of these to get a nice bit of depth without having to use any texture paste on top. But I'm just going to very simply cut through like that. So any tidying you need to do, you can do in a little bit. So as we've got this quite light background, I want to pop some other elements beneath that to make that clock pop up. So this is where we can start to bring in our offcuts. So I'm just going to tear this so that I get a rough edge. So again, if you've got something where you've cut a shape out of it, just try and just disguise that a little bit. Likewise, if your piece isn't quite long enough, also do the top and bottom of your piece. And then you need to decide if you want it to go literally to that edge so you can keep your cut edge, or if you just want it as like a little strip behind your clock, you could actually do a torn edge. So I'm going to look at this in situ, and I think that one can go to that edge. So at this point we might go, okay, I'm happy with that, stick that down. Now, just because this one is a thinner paper, it's perfectly fine to use a clear glue. Okay. I'm not looking to get this perfectly flat. I don't care if it has a few creases. So what we can actually do is actually start to push that around a little bit. So we get a little bit of dimension. So let's go for one of our other pieces. And I'm thinking it'd be really nice to put something there. So again, put our clock in so we can check that it still looks good when we've actually added that element. Don't be afraid to rotate things round. So if you think actually I need that colour to go up in that place, then rotate it. One of the benefits of using an abstract background is that you have that option. You haven't got to worry about is the text up the right way. Okay, so again, just going to grab some glue. Rather than that one, I think I'm going to go and just hold it up with a little bit of a 3D foam pad. Just because we've got that nice raised section. And sometimes if you're working over something that is raised like this, it's actually easier to apply your glue dots onto your actual surface where you've got that raised area, so you can actually work out where you need to go to kind of bridge the gap. So I need a little bit more than that, but not too much. Because while we've got these open areas, what we can actually do is start to tuck some elements underneath. So if you've got things like flowers that you want to put in that are on stems, you can tuck the stems behind. Okay, so I think I'm going to go that way. And just place that down onto there. Get that a little bit straighter. So then we do have a few other bits and pieces of offcuts that we can use. So it might be that you're looking at your piece and you're thinking, I really like this little track of colour that's going up this section. So I'm just going to chop that very roughly straight there. And let's actually do a little bit of fussy cutting. Okay, just going to cut into there, around here, and a little bit bottom. So we get this kind of fragmented approach. I'm going to pop that so that's going to sit underneath. And I'm just conscious of where I want my edge of my bookmark to be. So if we're looking at this bit here, we might decide that actually we want to cut that bit off because it's just going to be too much sticking out like that, and that's fine. So we can follow this track here, like so. And let's pop that just under there. So again, just going to pop a bit of 3D foam on this one, even though it's going to slide underneath. And I'm just going to use one of the little bits of waste from our 3D foam just to support that little thin end of our piece. There we go. They do come off eventually. So you want to try and offset your verticals a little bit so you're not always starting them at the same place. Tuck it underneath, and then we've got that sitting under there. And likewise, if you've got some dies with numbers and things, then you could also use those to create some background elements. So I'm just going to very quickly grab one of the sections from our die piece, and then we can put some colour onto that to use. So I'm going back to the picture raspberry, but you could spray this. The only reason I'm not spraying this at the moment is I'm conscious of drying time, but I would definitely say that is something that you might want to consider. I'm just going to pop these out. She says. There we go. Okay. So let's get a little bit of glue. And all the time I'm looking to kind of build up that sort of texture, dimension, without going too bumpy per se. So obviously if we were to stick like a 3D flower on this, your book isn't going to close very well. But something where you've got this kind of minimal dimension isn't going to hurt too much. Let's take the two. And I'm going to pop that up this way. Now our die cut might knock those out, but it doesn't matter, they're there for texture, for interest. So if you had some letter dies, if you've got some nice letter stamps, then we could use those. If you've got embossing folders with letters or numbers, then you can use those. Okay, so if we put our clock back in place, we can go, okay, we've got kind of the numbers are being pushed to the background, which is what we wanted. But this area up here is looking a little bit boring, and down here, so we can start to pick out a little bit of detail. So this is one of the stencils from the Indian Summer range, and I'm going to start to use it as a border. So to do that, what I'm actually going to do is try and do a little bit at a time. So I'm going to pull out a purple blending brush and the Villainous Potion. And I'm just going to do this little section here. Now, are you going to get this perfect every time? No, but you know what? It really doesn't matter. So next I'm going to use one of these little arch sections, and that's going to go along the next bit. Now when I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to make sure that the pattern comes off that edge as well. So rotate it so that you've got pretty much an equal amount of space either side of the arch. We can use a bit more ink on our brush. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this other section and just rotate that round to when I'm happy for our pattern to repeat. Take it down so it's off the edge, and we can go again. A bit extra ink. There we go. Around a bit more, and we can go back to our arch, because that would be the next bit on our border. Now because we're going round a corner, you are going to find that that repeat's going to shift slightly. So again, going to line it up on this edge so we've got more or less an equal amount of space. Like so. Just tuck your stencil underneath this section here, so again, no good reason for having it 3D'd up. Bit more ink, we'll do the same again. So now we're into our border. Now if you get to somewhere where you can't just slide your stencil under, if you gently press down, because we've used foam pads, they're going to have a bit of give in them. So whereas sometimes I will say, oh, layer them up with card instead, if you know that you're going to do some more stenciling after, if you use foam pads, it's going to be a little bit more forgiving. Okay. And we're nearly at the bottom, so just going to rotate that round. And into this bottom corner, I'm just going to put another one of these, just literally going 45 degrees up into that corner. Okay. So in terms of what you have on your mat, if you're using a glass mat, then you can just simply add a little water and use that to create a texture across what you've done so far, just by with a little flick. If you're using a rubber mat like me, you can just clean it up with just a kitchen towel and a little bit of water. So, just because I don't want to get my desk too wet at this point, I'm just going to do it dry so that there's nothing that's going to rub off onto my piece. Okay, so now we can bring this back in, and we're starting to see that we've got a good level of contrast between our background and our die cut, which is what we're going for. So now I can turn that over and go, okay, if I look at my piece here, we can see that this bit's going to be pretty supported, but these two sections here are going to be a bit more, not floppy, but it just needs a little bit of a foam pad to help it up. And same around these edges here. So it looks like we need one sort kind of there, 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 and there, and there. So let's do that. So if your foam pads are a little bit too big in places, then you can cut them in half, or in the case of this particular pack, I can use some of the waste to actually support areas where we don't want our foam to actually be visible. Another option is, if you are working with darker colours, then what you can actually do is just use some dark foam pads. And I actually have a black glue stick as well, which I'm going to be experimenting with. So that might be a way to go for your piece if you're going dark. So we one around about where there's 3. And another one by the 2. And I'll do the same in here, so that we're leaving room for the corners to kind of interact. And there we go. Now for the fun bit, removing all the backings from all your foam tapes. Going to line that up carefully. Try and get it so that that flat edge lines up with your bookmark. And there we go. So far so good. And you should have something that looks a bit like that. Now I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue just under this centre section. That's going to help support that. So anything that has a finals applicator is good. I'm just going to gently press that down. Now, depending on glue, you may need to give that a few moments just because you've got that uneven surface. But some tend to grab pretty quickly so that you can get on. So, finally, I think I'm going to add some sad images to that just to finish it off. So, let's pick one. I think it would be really nice to add a butterfly, and maybe 2. And I have some offcuts of the same card so that I can use that to actually build up if I want to. So whether I want to go 3D and actually lift the wings away from the bookmark. So given that I want this to be kind of practical for my particular piece, not going to be ideal. But if you're doing something else instead, so you could be doing a panel to go on the front of a book, for instance, and you could lift up the wings like that. There we go. Let's just grab my card. Check they fit on, always important. Pop a magnet, and I'm going to go for the villainous potion. So I don't always stamp in black. In actual fact, if I can avoid it, I will do. I'd rather stamp in a colour or grey. Move that back on my mat a bit just so you can see a bit better. What I love about stamping form is if you go, actually it just needs another layer of colour, we can just re-ink and do the same impression in it. And it's pretty accurate. Whereas if you're trying to do that by hand, it'd be quite a tricky process. And there we go. So again, the stamps will clean up just with some water and a bamboo cloth and an old flannel. Anything like that. So you don't have to use baby wipes if you don't want to. these off. I'm just going to quickly grab a couple of pencil crayons. So I'm going to work with a light pink. Now just be aware, because this is a oxide pad, sometimes you can still get a few little wet areas. So try and keep those away from your pencil crayon if you can help it. And I like to always start colouring butterflies from the inside out. Gives you the illusion that they're kind of coming off the page that way. So I'm going to do the same on this one. Being bigger, you can have a bit more fun though with colours. So this first layer is kind of a way of working out where you want your shading to go, but also as you start to blend, it's almost going to float the colour on top so that your blending becomes a bit smoother. So these are just ordinary colour pencils, they're not watercolour pencils or anything fancy. And I'm going to hop over to, let's go to mauve. So you can see that pink underneath is already deepening that colour when we go over the mauve. So you're not having to work as hard to get that blending. Also means it's going to get some interest in your colouring as well. And you don't need huge sets of colour pencils to have a good collection, she says. I'm somewhat pencil obsessed. But way back when I first started with decent colouring pencils, my first set was a 12 set of Derwent Studio pencils, and you can do a lot with just 12 pencils. And when I was at art college, they used to just have you working with sets of 12. Okay, so I'm going to go to a slightly deeper purple and put that right in the centre of these wings, which is going to make that body pop out forward. So you'll notice at the moment I haven't done any blues. Now I'm going to go to my light blue. I'm just going to shade around the tail, like so, so that you're still leaving a highlight in the middle. And then on this top section, I just do a U. Go to a darker blue, or even a tealy colour for those colours that we've used, just to kind of deepen that initial shadow. I should have something that looks a little like that. So, if you want to take lots of time fussy cutting it out, And you can do. I'm going to be very rough today. Okay. So, are you all planning a crafty weekend? I'm hoping to get some time to do a huge canvas that I want to do for the lounge. But also looking at having a little stall, so I'm going to have to start creating some stock for that, which will be cool. So those of you that are familiar with Birmingham might know the Red Brick Market, and that's something we're thinking of doing. Okay, so just this bottom section to do. By leaving a little bit of white border around makes life a little easier for your fussy cutting. So if you want to go up to the edge, it just takes a little longer to do. Okay, so there's our 2 butterflies. So now we just need to decide where we're going to put them. I'm thinking just there. And again, I'm just going to use some 3D foam pads just so that I know I'm keeping that depth consistent across. And I've just popped one in the middle, like so. And I'm going to slide it up to this edge here, like so. And there we go. Now, down this bottom section, it's quite solid down there anyway, so I can probably just go flat, like so. With a little bit of glue. Let's go for that one. Now I have pulled out some texture paste and things, because I didn't know whether I might use that on my clock or on some die cuts. So let's just see if I'm happy with that, because if not, now's a good opportunity to add a little bit more texture. And I think actually that might be okay like that. I might just put something in this section here. Let's see what I've got. Let's go for this little 3 that we've got cut out. I'm going to go back to my messy mat, like so. And given that we've got the purple and the green in that section, I think I'm going to go for another pink element. So this is the Pretty Whip Mousse, and the colour is Flirty. Oh, she says. That's if I can get the lid off. Me and lids at the moment. Might have to change colour until Ian comes back. I'll do it with this one, it's easier. So this one is Salty Sea. But yeah, if the lid can get welded on for me at the moment, it's kind of a given it will do so. I think it's because I'm still struggling with my hands a little bit. So it's a little bit sore when I do things like that. Let me just look back so I can see all of your comment, Carol. Planning to make a shadow box for my great granddaughter born this week. Ah, that's my weekend project. Oh, that'd be lovely. It's one of those where it's like, and now we need the picture. So I'm just tapping this onto my die cut. And what you'll find is the more you tap, the more kind of detail that you actually release from your die cut. Now, you are going to get mucky fingers, it's just a given. I'm just going to give that a little tap and try and set it down and let that dry. And scrape anything you haven't used back into your pot. And back on with the lid. Okay, now hopefully, fingers crossed, I can give that a bit of a blast. So I'm just going to use a pokey tool to try and stop it bouncing around too much, but chances are it's still going to do a little bit of a jump. I'm going to use it on low so that it's not blowing too much. And I wouldn't usually do this if I was just crafting here on my own. Let it dry naturally. And you also want to make sure that you don't overheat, else you can actually get it to start bubbling. Yeah, it's one way of keeping warm in the craft room. Somehow I managed to pick the coldest room in the house. It's not good. So if I shut the door for a bit of peace and quiet, I end up freezing. Okay. So, hopefully, she says, I can release that from my pokey tool. And it's still going to be a little bit soft, so when you're sticking it down, just be aware that you don't want to press too much. Okay, a little bit of glue onto our surface just so it's a little bit easier than trying to flip it over and actually apply that glue. So 2 little dots for our 2 bits for 3. In we go. Drop it down. She says, come on. There we go. Just going to use my pokey tool, I think, just to try and straighten that up just a little. And there we go. Job done. And there we go. So there's our session for today. So all you need to do to finish that off is just loop a cord through and job done. So, any questions before I go? I will quickly flick back to the group as well and just make sure I'm there. Okay, so nothing yet. And thank you, Lynette. So have a fantastic weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care and bye for now.